You'll note that my house has no coffee table at all. Want to live? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it'll give you a pretty good overview of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. Basically, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But in this video, it's our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where I look at a movie recommendation that came from you guys, something I've never seen before from the horror genre. I'll check it out, and then I let you know, was it syllabus worthy? Was it something that I thought was interesting or good enough or scary enough or whatever to be on the horror movie syllabus? And this is going to be a little bit of an interesting one today because the recommendation is The Coffee Table. And the recommendation comes from Emma Wolf from the Spooky Astronauts YouTube channel. And I want to be clear, she did not directly recommend this to me. She made a video about it, recommending it as a disturbing film, and I was interested. Side note, though, Emma was kind enough to give me some guidance and mentorship very early on in the channel. She gave me some good advice, and so thanks for that, Emma. It's worked rather well because the channel's doing exactly what I wanted to do. But I digress. The Coffee Table sounded intriguing from Emma's video. I really wanted to check it out, and it's hard for me to watch stuff not for the channel lately because there's a lot of stuff I'm trying to catch up on for the Horror Movie Supplement. For more information on that, check out horrormoviesyllabus.com. But the idea of checking this movie out for the channel for this Is It Syllabus Worthy series was a pretty easy one to do. So all I knew about this movie from Emma was that it was a disturbing movie, an anxiety-driving movie, and that it is a horror drama comedy. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but it was enough to definitely intrigue me, so I was definitely going to check this one out. So I did, and, well, did I like it? Did I hate it? Let's find out. Like I said, today's recommendation is The Coffee Table. The Coffee Table came out in 2022, I think. I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it's a little bit hazy. It says 2022, but it seems like maybe it got initially released then and maybe got a wider release in 2023, or possibly didn't even make it to the States until 2024. So it's a little bit gray, but we're going to go with 2022 and just say very recent movie, pretty new. And it's directed by a Spanish director named Calle Casas, and I don't really know him. I don't know his work. I looked it up, and it doesn't look like he has a whole lot of feature work behind him, a lot of shorts. So this is something like of a new experience for me to check him out. But an interesting one to start with, checking out this guy's career. It makes me pretty interested in him, but we'll get into all that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a young Spanish couple who have a newborn child, and they are bickering a lot, and the husband wants to buy a coffee table, and the wife does not like it, does not want it, she thinks it's ugly, and he buys it anyways, and it's kind of fueling in this argument that they're really kind of arguing anyways about a lot of stuff, including maybe that he's not as invested in his child as she is, and there's a lot of obvious issues with this couple, and then she goes to the store to run an errand while he stays home with the child and his new coffee table, and hijinks abound. We're going to stop there. And honestly, it's going to be a little bit challenging to talk about this movie without spoiling it, but we're going to try. Even though, I'll be honest with you, I saw pretty early where this was going, especially knowing it's a disturbing film. I saw kind of where it was going, at least initially. And then once the initial premise fully kicked in, I was kind of along for the ride like anybody else would be. But its initial premise is super messed up, and it's probably its biggest strength and the reason why it's so notorious to people. Like, this movie doesn't seem to be a super well-known movie, but the people who do know about it do describe it as very disturbing. And it's coming from this premise, which I am going to dance around it. There's no way around it. I'm going to dance around it instead of spoiling it. But suffice to say that the premise of the movie is going to be upsetting to a lot of people, very upsetting to a lot of people. And it's pretty taboo. It's stuff that usually doesn't happen in horror movies, and it's treated in a very interesting way. We're going to dig into that a little bit, at least as much as we can. And it is good to know that if you know what the premise is, or if you are able to deduce what the premise is before you're watching it, it blessedly shies away from really super explicit gore. Most everything that happens is implied rather than shown. And I don't know if that was for budget reasons or for story reasons, narrative reasons. But if it was for narrative reasons, it's a good call. It's a good call by the director to let your brain fill in the blanks because, again, really horrific premise that your brain's probably going to do worse than anything that could have been shown on the camera on the screen, and frankly, anything on the screen might have made it might have kind of undercut things a little bit. And I think that knowing what happened without showing what happened was the way to go with this movie. To me, that's its biggest strength, not the dark premise, but the way that they executed it by letting people know, the audience know what has happened, and then you're kind of waiting for the shoe to drop, waiting for characters in the movie to find out what you already know. That is what this movie hinges on. The vast majority of this movie is somebody has a secret and he doesn't want everybody else to find out. And you know what the secret is. And you know there's no way he can hide this secret. And it's going to come out. And the question is just when. And the whole movie is just waiting for this shoe to drop, waiting for this secret to come out. And Emma described this as anxiety inducing. And I can see why. Because if you can put yourself in the shoes of the main guy who's hiding the secret, you can understand how stressful and intense this is and how much anxiety he must be going under. So it could really tap into that. Here's the thing. Emma described this, or she read that it in IMDb described this as a horror drama comedy. And I actually 100% agree with that description of it because I think this movie's hysterical. I think it's funny. Now, not everybody's going to say that. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Like I said, messed up premise. Really going to be a problem for some people. Super taboo. Nobody in the movie is really a hero. They're kind of all unlikable, so it's really hard to figure out who to latch onto in this. So it's a bit of a challenge in that regard too. But it's hilarious to me. But it's like the blackest of black comedies. I think even just suggesting making a comedy out of this premise in and of itself is arguably offensive. And that just makes me like it all the more. It's hilarious. It is admittedly a demented idea, but I really enjoy the balls on it. Right? Frankly, like there's just the idea to take this premise and to set it up rather seriously and then have an entire movie about a guy trying to hide a secret that's fairly ridiculous. And the dialogue in this movie, that's where the comedy is. The comedy is in the dialogue because the whole movie's dialogue is just like rubbing salt in the wound of this guy's secret. It's just like all kind of like bleakly ironic, all of the things that people are saying that are just making him feel worse and worse and worse and making it harder and harder and harder for him to keep his mouth shut about this secret. And it's funny. It's just funny. It's so ludicrous. The premise, or not even the premise, because the premise is dark and very realistic, frankly, but the premise of him trying to hide the secret is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing. And we know right off the bat, this is never going to work. The things he comes up with, the ideas he comes up with, the lies he tells are so dumb. And then people are believing them. It's absolutely hysterical to me. And as a result, the movie doesn't feel nearly as disturbing to me as I was expecting. I kind of feel like the disturbingness was overstated. It was oversold a little bit to me. Sorry, Emma. But I have a real hard time taking the whole movie seriously because while the premise might be really dark, the premise of the movie, the whole hiding the secret thing is so funny to me and silly and really stretching the limits of your disbelief, like really having to suspend those, that it becomes ludicrous. It becomes hilarious to me. The one incident is going to give this movie its reputation. And again, maybe deservedly so. There's a lot of people that are going to nope out of this just from knowing what it's about or just when the incident happens, which happens fairly early in the movie. They're just gonna be like, no, I'm out on this. But for those of you that can stick around with it and really try to view it through the prism of drama comedy, this is going to be a really weird ride. And I say drama comedy too, because there is drama in this. And that's where maybe the movie makes a little bit of a misstep. You know, it starts out with this really serious, bleak, horrific premise. Then it delves into this bizarre, like secret keeping comedy thing that's just kind of goofy and ridiculous and almost slapstick, not quite, but it feels that way sometimes. And it's got these side characters that are just ludicrous. You know, you've got this brother who's dating a younger girl who comes to visit, and he's just a little overbearing and a little bit weird. There's this neighbor girl who's underage who keeps trying to fall in love with the guy, and he wants nothing to do with it, and she's threatening to break up his marriage. All this ridiculous side stuff going on there just winds up being like obstacles for him to deal with, and they're funny, and they're meant to be funny, but the original premise is so dark, and then the ending, and this is where I think the misstep is, the ending stops being funny and just gets downright serious. It's like total seriousness for the ending. It's a pretty bleak, dark ending that is treated pretty straightforward, and no longer trying to kind of play for the laughs and you know, to kind of tickle your anxiety. It's just dark. So the tone of this movie shifts a lot, and it's a little bit of a challenge, I think. But for me, it's just a wild ride. I just was having a good time watching this movie, and just going. I did not know where the hell it was going to go, and it was just, I was having a blast. I was having a really good time with this movie, despite the fact that it's pretty grim, and I shouldn't be having, it's taboo. You really shouldn't be laughing at something like this, but I couldn't help it. It really hit for me, and I didn't find it nearly as disturbing. Maybe because, again, I saw the premise coming a little bit. I didn't know going in what the premise was, but early in the movie I figured out what was going to happen, and it did, and it was wild. And so I had a great time with this one. I had a good experience with it. But does that make it syllabus worthy? Let's find out. So, is the coffee table syllabus worthy? I kind of want to personally say yes, but I'm leaning towards no, and I'll explain. See, I don't think this movie's going to quite get the cult status that I would think it needs to be noteworthy enough to be on the syllabus. It's got a bit of buzz now, but I'm guessing a lot of you might not have even heard about it. I hadn't heard about it until Emma brought it up. And so it's not really quite building up that kind of buzz or reputation, and I'm not sure that it will, because the premise is, it's sick, it's demented. It's a really unsettling premise that's going to turn off a lot of people, and they're not going to be into it. And so I don't know that it'll ever really quite get that cult horror status that people love or talk about. It might be talked about in a little bit of a taboo way, and like, oh my god, you got to see this. But it's not really the endurance test that people kind of make it out to be. Like, oh, you really got to, you know, you sit through this and it's going to give you anxiety, or you know, it's just so disturbing that you can't take it. I suspect many horror fans will find that to be overblown and be a little disappointed by it. I wasn't disappointed, but I didn't get what I was expecting. I was expecting something to be really messed up throughout the movie. I wasn't expecting it to be funny. Even though Emma had said, you know, horror, drama, comedy, I really thought she was saying that it was just mislabeled, but it's not. It's not. It really is a horror, drama, comedy, for better and for worse. But I don't think that people are going to really connect with it in a large enough scale to warrant syllabus worthiness. But I kind of want it to be on there just because I really enjoyed it. I just really think it's a neat movie. It's really well made. I really like the work. All the performers are really selling this movie's premise because, again, it's ridiculous. The whole keeping things secret is ridiculous, and it's hilarious, and it's working because the actors make it work, and the director does a really nice job of keeping the tension right, keeping the comedy right. The balance is really sweet. So in that sense, I kind of want to make it like a cult horror comedy entry, at least like an extra credit or something like that, or maybe like a doctorate's cut because it's so deep of a cut. But maybe it's just a little too obscure. Maybe it's a little too random. But I've put rather, you know, obscure movies on the horror movie syllabus before too, things that I just personally really like. So for me, I don't know, like I'm a little on the fence of it. I think generally speaking, like for the general public, like for the horror community, I kind of think it might not make the cut. But for me personally, it kind of does. Which again, I know I've been doing kind of wishy-washy determinations lately, but there's a reason why, and this is one of them. It's like I think I'm hopefully explaining this well, that I would like to try to find a place for this on the horror movie syllabus, like horror comedy, but not everybody's going to see it as a comedy, so there's that issue. Cursed objects, you know, because the coffee table, but that's not really quite the case. I don't want to spoil the movie, but it's not exactly the case, you know. And the fact that the movie shifts tone so much makes it hard to call it a horror comedy, makes it hard to call it a horror drama, makes it hard to define what it is. And that's what I think makes it so good, but also makes it really hard to categorize for a horror movie syllabus. And any of the obvious places where it should go, which, you know, some of them I won't even mention because it'll spoil the movie. It's a hard sell for the GP, for the general public, to embrace this movie as something that is, you know, notorious enough to make it, because it's not getting enough of a buzz or a reputation to do that. You know, Interesting, maybe, yeah, good, it is good. I don't know, I'm kind of talking myself into saying yes on this, so, you know what, I'll give you a definitive answer. Yes, for my syllabus, yes, I would try to find a place to put the coffee table because I just really dug it. So those are my thoughts on the coffee table, and I know that's a little bit hazy because it's a hard movie to talk about without spoiling the premise. But if you can go in without knowing the premise, do it because I think the surprise, if you don't see it coming, it'll be a shocking gut punch of a surprise, and then the rest of the movie is just really bizarre and hilarious. So check it out by all means, and let me know what you think. If you think you might not have the constitution for it, maybe look it up and then decide for yourself because it ain't gonna be for everybody for sure. But what is for everybody is this horror trivia pursuit card that I'm about to talk about. I'm going to read on camera here a trivia pursuit card, no cutting, so you guys know that on cheat. And the coffee table is largely a psychological horror movie. It really is tapping into that. So we're going to look at the psychological category in the card. And the question is, unused footage from what Stanley Kubrick film was used in the theatrical cut of 1982's Blade Runner? And I'm going to tell you right now, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to this question. I am a Stanley Kubrick fan. I do like his movies very much. Some of them we've talked about on the channel, or at least one of them for sure we've talked about on the channel. We may talk about some other ones. I might try to squeeze some on there because I love some Stanley Kubrick. And I don't know the answer to this question, and in part because I'm more likely to be watching, the director's cut of Blade Runner, like most nerds. But B, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, I don't love Blade Runner. I think it's a little overrated. I know everybody worships it as like a top 10 sci-fi movie. It probably doesn't make my sci-fi top 10. But Blade Runner 2049, on the other hand, I love Blade Runner 2049. That movie's fantastic. So controversial opinion, come at me if you must. But I'm not a huge Blade Runner fan, so I don't watch it over and over again. I definitely don't go and revisit the theatrical cut. If I'm going to rewatch it, I'm going to watch the director's cut. It's the way to go. So that puts me at a disadvantage because I've seen the theatrical cut maybe once, possibly twice. And I haven't seen it in decades, easily decades. And so I don't remember. I don't. So it's going to lead me to a situation where I'm going to try to make an educated guess, some deductive reasoning here. Given the time frame, given the subject matter of Blade Runner, given my knowledge of Stanley Kubrick movies, what's the most likely movie to be on there? And I'm guessing there's some diehard Blade Runner fans here who know the answer to this, and awesome, good for you. And if you don't, if you're like me, where maybe you don't care about Blade Runner, or maybe you don't watch it enough to know, or maybe you don't watch the theatrical version, maybe you don't know Stanley Kubrick movies, whatever. If you're making an educated guess like me, let's kind of walk through it, but go ahead and lock in the answer right now. Go ahead and button that down because I'm going to go ahead and start talking out loud. So given the idea of what Blade Runner's talking about in terms of like controlling people and the replicants and everything and this and that, and given the movies that came out before Blade Runner that are Stanley Kubrick movies, the best answer I can get, I don't think it would be 2001 because I don't think they'd put another sci-fi movie in the sci-fi. It doesn't track for me. The one that makes the most sense to me is A Clockwork Orange. A Clockwork Orange, I think, I'm thinking like the scenes where Alex is being, deprogrammed and reprogrammed, and they have his eyes all opened up and everything. That's my thought, and it's a pure guess. I really don't know, but that just seems logical to me. I can rationalize that. The reasoning is there for me, so I'm going with Clockwork Orange. My final answer, locking it in. Let's check the card. The card says The Shining, 1980. The Shining. The Shining. I didn't know that. I told you guys I didn't know that, but I'm a little surprised by that because now I'm kind of curious what scenes from The Shining are in the theatrical cut of Blade Runner. And I'll be honest with you, I don't feel like rewatching the theatrical cut of Blade Runner to find out. So somebody in the comments, let me know which scenes from The Shining are in there and where were they put in the Blade Runner movie? Because I find that to be surprising. I'm trying to think of what would make sense in Blade Runner. Is it like the bloody elevator scene? What scene from The Shining makes sense to be in there? I'm very curious about that. Or I guess it's supposed to be unused footage, so maybe it's not something that's actually in the movie, and I forgot about that until right now. But I'd be curious to know what scenes in Blade Runner are from The Shining. Let me know in the comments below. But thank you guys very much for hanging out. I really appreciate this. Thanks to Emma for making this video about the coffee table to inspire my video about the coffee table. And thanks to all of you guys who keep leaving recommendations. We're making our way through them, and they have been good to great. So I'm having a good time. By all means, leave them. Keep leaving them in the comments. I really appreciate it. Until next week when we do something completely different, I'm just going to cut this off now by saying, class dismissed.